5-star, Dustin Starr. What's up? How are you, Starr?
Yeah, good to be back on here, man. Let's talk some pro wrestling. I heard CJ earlier cutting a good promo about wearing masks. That's like a wrestling promo, CJ.
Oh, my fault. Listen, when the spirit moves me, it moves me, man. It doesn't make sense.
That's good.
I feel you.
That's what you want. You wrestling. Everyone should cut wrestling promos more often. That's my thing. Wrestling promos are extremely fun to cut. And when you see them in real life, it's wonderful.
Yeah, you can start it out all sorts of ways. You know, let me tell you something, brother. Me, woo, Gene, woo.
I'm just saying, man, if you want to go see Vanilla Ice, whatever, just know you're not getting Texas, Oklahoma this year. If Vanilla Ice is worth Texas, Oklahoma, knock yourself out, man. They
took WrestleMania away from us this year. If you want to go see a live wrestling event, then you need to do your part, and it's simple. I know the death rates are going down, yeah, but still, if you catch it, which everybody is, numbers are huge. You get to quarantine for 2 weeks, and it shuts everything down. So you can't kind of have your cake and eat it too when it comes to this type of deal. And you know, I think and I know this is kind of something you were talking about a little bit earlier, but this is something that has become a lot more serious over the last couple of months. I think we can all agree on that. Mm-hmm. And we can't have live events. We can't have mass gatherings and all that stuff if we don't do our part. And it's very, very simple to just throw a mask on when you go into a store or go into public. I mean,
what is the tricky thing that I'm shocked, but it's true. They did a vote yesterday in Knox County, Knoxville, Tennessee. And the Knox County mayor happens to be one Glenn Jacobs, a.k.a. Kane, a.k.a. Isaac Yankem, DDS. He's so many things, but most notably Kane. Mm-hmm. This is a man who wore a mask as his job for, I would say, 15 years or so. He was the only vote against mandatory mask mandates in Knox County. At the Knox County. You wore a mask for 20. Come on, Kane.
Unreal.
Of all people,
yeah.
You know about wearing a mask. They kept your face. You got burned in the funeral home. We know the story. That's why you had to wear the mask. Jeez.
Man, I hear people say I'm not going to be suffocated by a mask. Man, Kane wrestled 30-minute matches wearing a mask, and it did not suffocate him. And, by the way, he's like 6'9", 350 pounds.
Yeah.
I mean, if he can breathe in a mask, you can breathe in a mask while you go into the store. I'm sorry.
I think it's a little easier to go to Whole Foods and pick up your produce than it is to wrestle in an Inferno match against The Undertaker.
Right.
I mean, I think you're going to be okay. I promise you.
Can we say the same thing? Can we say the same thing about Mankind?
Yep.
But Mick Foley supports the mask situation, whereas Kane has turned his back, the ultimate heel turn against the entire group in Knox County.
Hey, if I say masked wrestler all time, just coolest masked wrestler, greatest masked wrestler all time, who y'all got?
Oh, that's easy. Rey Mysterio.
Ah, yes.
Hands down, man. He's a Hall of Famer. He has become world champion when people think he couldn't do it. He's one of the biggest baby faces, most recognizable. Actually, I saw a picture the other day that I want to say, I can't remember what toy company it was, but they had made more Rey Mysterio action figures than any other action figure. I mean, there had to be 100 different ones just because he had different masks and all that stuff. But Rey Mysterio has to be the most decorated masked wrestler. And I'm trying to think, but he's at the top of my list for sure.
Oh, I mean, in terms of what he's accomplished and winning titles and the fact that he's done it at his size is tremendous. I mean, he's such a undersized wrestler. You never would have thought that a guy of his stature would be world champion, would be able to have matches and to have legitimate and good looking matches against guys like Big Show and it's very
still
hard
doing it.
Yeah, and still doing it. It's hard to do that. It's hard to do that, man.
Yeah.
You know how it is when you're fighting somebody that's, significantly bigger or smaller, to make that thing work is not always easy, but he's, man, kudos to him for that. The one that jumped to my mind. Oh, go ahead.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No. Go ahead. I was just going to piggyback on the whole Glenn.
No, piggyback. No, talk about that for a second, because I got more on this, but I want to hear what you had to say.
I think it might be one of those political stance, not like political Democrat, Republican, but political like WWE. You know how they were fighting against the mask thing for so long. Maybe since he's still part of the WWE family, maybe that kind of influenced his vote. But then you did see people wearing masks. They had to wear masks on Raw this week when they were in the crowd. Mm-hmm. So I think that might have been one of those WWE type of votes. You know what I'm saying?
Maybe so. That may be part of it.
I don't know. Other than that, I don't know how it makes much sense for him not to vote yes. It's such, especially him wearing a mask all this time, and it's very clear that the numbers are going up rapidly.
No, so. I mean it's become a political thing. Unfortunately, this is where we are in all of this, and I think that for whatever reason, whether it's political, WWE or political Democrat, Republican, I don't know, but that's where he's at. I was going to say in terms of other masked wrestlers, my favorite masked wrestler is Jushin Thunder Liger.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, Jushin Thunder Liger was a Japanese wrestler. Just his mask is really cool. I don't know if you saw. Have you ever seen his mask, CJ? Do you know?
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now. As a matter of fact.
Yeah, Jushin Thunder Liger.
Oh yeah.
His mask is awesome. So right out of the gate, and he wears this bodysuit, and he looks like a Power Ranger kind of thing or something. Like he just has this. He looks like a superhero, and the guy is an amazing worker. He has an incredible moveset and put on some wonderful matches. His matches with Brian Pillman in the 90s were awesome. Chris Benoit matches were awesome. I love Jushin Thunder Liger. I thought he was awesome.
There's a lot of great. La Parka comes to mind just because he was so animated, the chairman of WCW, and he's still wrestling today. But I think I wouldn't put La Parka on the level of a Rey Mysterio. But
he's super fun though. La Parka is super fun though with the guitar thing and the dancing and all that stuff.
Psychosis had the horn. So he was always really cool, and these guys were really famous WCW luchadors, and that's what WCW did very, very well. But the difference in all those guys compared to a Rey Mysterio is he kind of transcended that cruiserweight division, and when he went to WWE, they put the mask back on him, which I thought was crazy to ever take a mask off of Rey Mysterio Jr. Just imagine the merch sales that you're losing by taking that mask off. And so then for him to become world champion, the underdog, and all that kind of stuff, I'm going to say that he's got to be the top masked wrestler out there.
I mean, you had Mr. Wrestling 2, who was a big famous one back in the day. Mm-hmm. You've had like Tiger Mask. A lot of guys have gone under the hood as Tiger Mask and have been very successful. There were quite a few, but a lot of times the mask was a means to an end. You saw the mask used as a part of a storyline, like the Midnight Rider, the Yellow Dog, or something like that. When the loser leaves town match, and you come back under the hood. Hey, look! I can't believe this guy. That kind of thing.
Interesting. We're talking about it. We're going to do today on the Grind City Wrestling podcast. We're going to do our Mount Rushmore of pro wrestling, and of course, I think we probably had hundreds of tweets about who the top 4 is, and I think it would be good to do maybe a Mount Rushmore of masked wrestlers. Now that you're mentioning that, the top 4 of all time.
So who's your Mount Rushmore then? I mean, I don't know. I don't want to I don't want to jump in here, but I'm just curious, quite frankly.
I can't stooge off my entire list just yet, but you gotta. I mean, come on, Stone Cold Steve Austin, Hulk Hogan, 2 guys are the top merch sales of all time. How do you have a Mount Rushmore without Vince McMahon?
Yeah, that's the thing. It's hard.
I don't know that you can.
It's hard to.
Or Andre the Giant. Now those guys, Andre and Vince, are going to not be on a lot of guys' lists. You're going to have Hogan, Flair, Rock, Austin, and then that 4th slot is where it always gets crazy. But who would be more deserving than Vince McMahon himself or Andre the Giant? For crying out loud. So the list is very, very hard to come up with. So you've got all sorts of variables there.
Can I make a suggestion?
Really hard.
Sure.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think you definitely need to consider this guy.
What?
Nacho Libre?
Nacho Libre?
Is that what we're doing?
Come on, Zach.
Oh my gosh, I have a funny Nacho Libre story.
Oh, let's hear it.
Back when the movie was coming out, we were doing television with Corey Macklin at it was the CW network, but it was a different building and all that kind of stuff. Anyways, they wanted to hire me to do a commercial. And I said, oh, man, this is awesome. So at that time, I had not done very much TV work other than just wrestling. So I'm thinking, this is great. I'm going to do a commercial. And when they explained to me that they wanted me to play a Nacho Libre part because, get this, Peter, because I had the same body style of Nacho Libre.
Weren't you like Mr. Tennessee back to back?
What?
Well, now this was 20 years ago. This was the very start. I was probably 215, 230. I was a big guy, but I did not look like. And I was offended when they told me that.
What?
So I'm going to tell you guys, I literally turned down my first commercial offer because I felt so self-confident. It killed me, guys. They told me I looked like I had the same body style as Nacho Libre. I turned that commercial down and started doing like double cardio, and that's how I ended up. That's one of the reasons why I got in shape.
The birth of 5-Star. The birth.
Nacho Libre. Thank you so
of
much,
Mr. Tennessee, because of the Nacho Libre. It was very reminiscent.
At first I was like, hey, that's awesome. They're noticing me, like I thought that was great that I was getting to, but then I literally turned it down because they said they had the same body style as Nacho Libre. I told them sorry, man, I'm booked. Maybe next time.
I have a similar story about when I was in college and I used to go get takeout and Chinese food at this place that was near my apartment. And the one time I went to go pay for it, and they had seen me there a lot because it was near my apartment. It was easy to get like a $5 takeout thing. You could fill up the buffet with as much food as you could possibly cram in there, as long as you could shut it. The rule was as long as you could shut the thing, you're
good.
So I had a week's worth of food in there, and the lady was checking me out. She goes, you look a lot like Jared from Subway before he lost all that weight.
Oh.
And I said, that's it, I'm done. I didn't go back. I thought maybe I had to reconsider some life choices at that point.
I feel you. I know the feeling, man.
Damn.
I know. I was like, don't you want me to come here?
No, because you're eating $65 worth of food off of $5.
Like what? Like what is that? This is, yeah. Anyway, it was a great place too. It hurt my heart not to. Probably helped my heart not to go there, but then it hurt my heart as well. So
we just lost Dustin. Let's try and get Dustin back on the line.
Got
a couple
happened? Did you hang up on Dustin?
I didn't touch it. We got a couple of texts to get to about the topic of favorite masked wrestlers. The greatest masked tag team was the Interns. One texter says.
Oh boy, that's going back. That's a deep cut right there. Now you're exactly right about that. I was thinking about Mount Rushmores. I mean, the Mount Rushmore in all of wrestling is extraordinarily difficult. It's hard enough, honestly, to do Mount Rushmore of like Memphis wrestling. I mean, that's a hard enough challenge to put together. You'd obviously have to have Lawler on there. I mean, would you have Dave and Lance? Would you have? Who? Have you done that, Star? Have you done a Mount Rushmore of Memphis wrestling?
Lawler and Dundee are going to be your top 1 and 2. I don't care who you are. It's got to be Lawler, Dundee, 1 and 2. And then the next 2, you're going to have guys like Lance, Dave, that people are going to say, well, they weren't wrestlers. Do they deserve to be on there? Then you'll also have people saying Andy Kaufman, which Andy Kaufman was not in Memphis very long, but the impact that he made would land on people's list. And I don't know if he, not being a wrestler, I don't know if he, I hate to say deserve, but, I don't know if it's the right category. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But then you got like a handsome Jimmy Valiant who was big. You got Eddie Gilbert.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Austin Idol.
You've got a ton of great ones.
Sputnik Monroe. What about Sputnik Monroe back in the day?
Yeah, Sputnik. Jackie Fargo.
Basically,
definitely. There's no Jerry Lawler. There's no Strut. there's a lot of stuff that you wouldn't have if you didn't have Jackie Fargo. So he's definitely got to be. But Fargo's kind of going to be your Bruno Sammartino, where the older demographic is always going to put a Bruno on the list, and where the younger demographic that didn't actually get to see him wrestle, Jackie Fargo, I can go back and find just a little bit of great footage that you can see of him. Most of it's wrestling Lawler, but I didn't grow up watching him. So it's kind of, and if you look at football, it'd be like a Joe Namath, Johnny Unitas type of thing, where we know they were great, but I didn't necessarily grow up watching them as a kid growing up.
The thing that I look, I agree with you. The thing that I look at though to go to the Memphis wrestling thing, because I watch and I think you're seeing some of it with AEW and maybe. You're getting back to it a little bit, but I watched the old. I got some of the old Memphis shows from back in the day. If you go back and watch them, Memphis wrestling, it wasn't necessarily the greatest work in the world. Like you weren't putting together, unbelievable suplexes and amazing combination holds and all this stuff. But the storytelling and the pacing of storytelling. And that I really think that wrestling, and I like that AEW seems to be kind of getting back to that pacing. But the way they would tell the story over the course of a live television show, the way they would tell the story over the course of several Mondays, and continue to kind of slowly build feuds, the basics of it, I think was so well done. And I feel like we hotshot so much now that we've gotten away from that. But if you watch the way they just very magically work and just kind of turn the heat up slowly but surely, it's I think it's really excellent and way ahead of its time in terms of storytelling.
Yeah, it was just a different day and age where you're not worried about ratings or what do they call them, like the quarter ratings,
right? The quarter hour stuff, and
all that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. You weren't looking at it like a science like that, and you're right. You wouldn't see a lot of 5-star matches. I mean, the King's not gonna. He's not a headlock, tackle, step over, tie you in a pretzel kind of guy. He's a fighter. That's what Lawler and Dundee did. They're punchers
one of the best
and
working
kickers.
punches in the business. Yeah.
And when you go to WWE or you talk to anybody that's inside of AEW or WWE or anything like that, they know the Memphis style. And they call it the Memphis style. They don't call it the Southern style. It's Memphis style, and that's punching and kicking and using a personal, any kind of personal story that they can. Lawler and Dundee were the best at that. Where Dundee would put his car on the line, or he would put his wife's hair on the line, and they would just use personal. I want to talk to Dundee about that in more detail because I've heard so many stories about it. But he had to have so much heat at his house.
Oh,
how much did they have to pay to shave Dundee's wife's head? That's what I want to know.
I can't even imagine that discussion. I can't even imagine bringing that up. Hey, honey, I got an idea let me just sit down for a second.
Right.
Like Maria, what would have to happen for for Maria's head to be shaved?
We've actually kicked the idea around about putting the hair on the line and then it not be my hair, it be Maria's hair. That's a real brave thing to do.
She's a pro. She's a pro. She's a pro's pro. So, but
I would have to win, man.
I mean, I can't. That would hurt my heart. I can't even imagine what it would do for her and for you. Oh God,
especially if I lost.
That's what you can't lose that, Star. I mean, you can't.
Not good.
God.
Hey, who knows? Who knows? Maybe one day it'll happen on CW30.
Just don't lose, okay, man? Whatever.
I can't lose.
Don't screw this thing up, buddy. I don't want to see.
Not on Memphis TV. I can't lose on Memphis TV.
Not on Memphis TV. I know you've had your issues with some of the, but you can't possibly do that. Last question, since we're talking about Mount Rushmores and you were talking about Lawler, I think it's harder to narrow this down. But I'll ask you just from a purely working standpoint. I think Lawler's got to be top of the list for me. Or certainly on the list. In your mind, watching all the matches that you've watched and seeing all that you've seen, who had the best working punch? Mount Rushmore, the punch in the business that looks spectacular. The guy that could make that punch just sing.
Well, being from Memphis, Lawler Dundee had the best punches ever. If Lawler's number one, then Dundee's got to be like 1B because those guys would throw these haymakers. I mean, and it was some of them. until I got in the business, I thought, man, those look so real. But then growing up and getting in the ring with them, a lot of them are real.
Sometimes
they will definitely tag you. I have been in the ring before and taken a hook from Lawler to where I think I heard him apologize. He hit me so hard. Jeez, King. But if you're looking at, kind of outside the Memphis territory, a guy's punches that I always admired was the Macho Man Randy Savage. He could throw that jab. He was just such a good jabber, and then he would throw that right one and knock you down. Macho Man's punches were always solid to me.
You kind of have that little short right hand. You kind of stub it in there, which I think
he snapped it.
I always thought Bobby Eaton had great punches.
Yeah,
Bobby Eaton's punches. Michael Hayes had that little snap jab that was always
old school, man.
That was always fantastic. And I always thought I really liked Mr. Perfect. Curt Hennig would throw.
Mr. Perfect. He was so good. It's not talked about enough, like his broadcasting abilities too. So not only was he really, really good in the ring, but if you hear him on commentary, I think it was kind of like the early '90s where he did some commentary with Vince and everything.
When his back kind of flared up, and he had to get for a little bit. Yeah,
but it just seemed like Mr. Perfect was one of those guys. And not only did he do everything great inside the ring, but even sitting at the broadcast table, he could have had, like right now, had he still been alive, he would probably be at the broadcast booth on one of these major networks doing commentary. He was just that good. But Perfect was great at everything. I'm thinking Macho Man, Lawler, Dundee.
Bret Hart always had a good one, too.
Yeah, Bret was pretty good. Man, there's a lot of good punches. Jeff Jarrett. His punches still look good to this very day.
Absolutely.
They were, when he entered the Royal Rumble 1 and 2 against Elias, they were putting over his punches real big. And I think it's a Memphis thing, man, because you got Jarrett, Lawler, and Dundee, to me, 3 of the best punchers that you've ever seen, and they all came from Memphis.
Well,
maybe they helped each other out.
I think that's it. I think you're exactly right about that. And then you have the guys like you said, Lawler. It's what sometimes you gotta make those things a little bit snug because you can't. You'd rather miss too close than too far away. You want to make sure that this thing is where it needs to be. Then you have a guy like Vader who would just beat the hell out of you. I didn't even call those working punches because he just would beat you up in the corner. There's really no. I don't know if you're working at that point. He's just assaulting you at that stage.
No kidding. He was rough. If you watch him in Mankind,
oh my God,
him and Cactus Jack, like their WCW days or even something from Japan, those guys are literally fighting.
Just fighting. You're just watching. You're basically watching a UFC fight at that point. That's where, man, it looks really good. Well, that's because they're just beating the hell out of each other. So
yeah, it's because he's killing me out there.
That's why your face just looks. I mean, you're pockmarked, bruised up, all that stuff. Great fight, guy. Appreciate it, buddy. It's a unique world. Well, you got the Grind City Wrestling Podcast. Star's on his way. I saw the tweet. He's also wearing the TV title pin, which I always appreciate when you're out there. So check that out and find out the Mount Rushmore of wrestling from Star. Also, of course, you got on CW30 at noon, Championship Wrestling from Memphis.
So it's kind of cool. This Saturday's 4th of July, so we've got a big 4th of July special where we got action-packed hour on Saturday, and then I will tell you this: you definitely need to watch on 4th of July, or put it on your DVR, or catch up with it on YouTube. But the next week, on July 11th, we have a huge announcement. Huge.
So that is a week. That is next Saturday, not this Saturday, but next
Saturday, the 11th. It's so big you can call it humongous. So I got to tease you guys with that because I'll be talking about that with you guys before long, for sure.
Okay, I like that tease. All right.
It's a bit of good news. It's good news in a world right now that sometimes it's hard to find some of that good news.
We need it. We need it bad. So please, next week, know that, and check out this week as well for a special 4th of July edition of Championship Wrestling. Star, enjoyed it, buddy. Thank you.
Thanks, Star.
Yes, sir. Thank you, guys.
All right, man. He's Dustin Star, 5-star. Check out that Grind City podcast that he's up to. Also, find out more from Star on Twitter at Dustin Starr. That's Star with 2 R's, of course. When we come back, we will look at a very interesting turn of events for one of my favorite teams, as well as some news from Florida. Not unexpected, but not necessarily super awesome either. We'll do that when we return from the Family Leisure Studios. Real Sports Talk, Sports 56, 96.1, 87.7.
R&R on Sports.
Let's talk about the bubble in the NBA sense, but there's a team and there's a organization that's already trying the bubble situation down in Florida, in Orlando, in fact, and that is MLS. The MLS is Back tournament is starting in about a week, and MLS is down in Florida going through their training camps and trying to get themselves ready in the bubble, and they got a problem, and a big problem already, because FC Dallas is a mess in here right now. Even though they are in the bubble, they had announced yesterday that FC Dallas has 6 players test positive since arriving in Orlando on Saturday. When they flew in, they were tested prior to arrival, and they all tested negative. By the time they got there, 2 players had tested positive, then 4 more tested positive on Wednesday. Then later on yesterday, 3 more players tested positive, plus a coach. So we are now up to 10 players. We're up to 9 players and 3 staff members, I believe. So we have 12 folks involved with the team now who have all tested positive just over the last few days. And, they are all being quarantined away from the other teams and other folks at the Swan and Dolphin Resort over at Walt Disney World. They're also at Walt Disney World, just in a different part of the Walt Disney World Resort. No other members of the MLS delegation have tested positive since arriving in Orlando. CJ, they only got 30 players on the roster. 3 of them are on loan and are not with the club in Orlando. There's a 4th player who's suspended because of a domestic abuse allegation situation that he's dealing with. He's a backup goalkeeper. So that means beginning today, they could have basically half their team available because of the COVID situation if they choose to train. And ideally, the rest of the team is going to be negative. Who knows? But based on this kind of spread, and this is what our epidemiologist friend Zachary Benny was talking about when he said, if one team ends up with 2, 3, 4 cases, it won't take long for it to jump up quickly in the bubble situation, and you could find yourself in a real tough deal. This is why the NBA, this is why players and coaches need to be quarantining now, because obviously, Dallas is one of the hardest hit areas right now. Texas is one of the hardest hit areas, and it's pretty clear these players had it and flew it into the bubble. In that middle ground, we said you could have it for up to 5 days without testing positive. So clearly they got it, flew in. The MLS pre-bubble testing is not as stringent, it does not appear, as the NBA's is. This one got through, and now they're in complete disarray. This is the NBA has to watch this closely, because this is exactly what a lot of folks are afraid might happen, and what you do not need to happen.
And it's something that can very, very really happen. And what does that do then? What does that do? This is a team that has half its roster just gone. You can't sign that many free agents. I'm thinking about NBA now. Somebody loses 6 or 7 players and a couple of staff members. What are you going to do? What's the point of having them there? What if it happens in the second round of the playoff? God forbid, in the finals or the conference finals. What happens then? This is, like you said, the reason why they need to be quarantining. Really, they should have started quarantining players a week ago, week and a half, 2 weeks ago. Hey, quarantine now. You're going to come in. We're going to practice at the facility. We want to make sure that you're safe there. And then when we fly, we're going to test you some more. And just make sure you're quarantined, not around anybody, because all it takes is for one person to get it. And then 1 becomes 2, 2 becomes 4, 4 becomes 8. And now you've got a situation on your hand where an entire roster is just decimated by coronavirus.
It won't. It's just that's what you're trying to avoid. I mean, you're trying to catch the cases. You've got right now. You've seen the cases right now in the NBA. The ones that have been caught, that's good. Isolate, quarantine, all that stuff. continue testing. This is where the idea of continual testing becomes a big deal, for the NBA. Not just test once when they arrive back at training camp around the area, whatever their home market is, but also on top of that, keep testing. You got to keep testing. You have to find out. You got to root this thing out, because once you get in the bubble, if you have a positive test there, particularly if you end up with a positive test once play starts, then you see how quickly it can spread, because once people are in the bubble, they are assumed to be, negative and safe, and they're still taking precautions when you're in the bubble, but not as much. And you're playing games. Obviously, you're practicing. You're doing all the full contact stuff. It's very easy to spread in a group situation like that. So this is why you really want to avoid anything like that. We've seen it in military situations when everyone is in close quarters. The Army had to stop some special training programs earlier this week because 90 of the 110 students were positive. 90 of 110. It's a big percentage. They had to stop the thing altogether because, again, once it gets in there, it's just going to ravage. It's very easy to transmit, and it's going to go, and then that's how you can get some insane number like that.
And why
you don't need it.
Your bubble, your mesh, your biodome, whatever you want to call it, why it can't have back doors? Because if, like you said, once it gets in there, it just wreaks havoc. Once it gets into the player population, once it gets into the team population, it's going to spread. And if you have back doors and you allow certain people in and out, there's a real risk that those people can contract it and lead to the asymptomatic spread of it. And now you got a whole different set of issues on your hand. So if you're the NBA and you're looking at this, you've got to think to yourself, man, listen, we might not need that back door. We might not need people coming in and out. We may need to find a way to get hotel staff to stay inside the bubble also. That's a huge ask for people, but we may need to find a way to sweeten the deal enough to get them to stay inside the bubble just so we can finish this season. Because if hotel staff can come and go, and if Adam Silver can come and go, it's only a matter of time, man, before the right person contracts it and then spreads it around the rest of the league, and you got to shut the season back down again.
So that's the situation MLS finds itself in right now. They have to figure out if they got to stop this thing in Dallas. They got to get this.
Is
thing
it in
control.
Dallas or with the Dallas?
Well, that's what I mean.
Dallas.
In the Dallas contingent that's in the bubble.
Okay.
They're in the bubble, but they are basically 30% infected.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a big percentage, big number. They got to isolate them, figure this thing out, get it under control, and make sure that they don't pass this thing along, make sure that other players, because their first game is scheduled for a week from today against Vancouver, and I'm sure Vancouver is very interested in making sure that they don't get out on the field with a bunch of people that are, unknown or asymptomatic carriers of COVID. You don't need that. If you start having that, then you might as well shut the whole thing down. At that point, you just shut the whole thing down and be done with it. It's a numbers game, and the growth has been. You can see it in the country now. When this thing gets into the community, it starts to spread quite quickly, and it doubles. It's been doubling in Shelby County every 30 days, and we are right smack dab on a 30-day doubling rate from the very beginning of this thing till now, which means that in March. The cases from March to April doubled, April to May doubled, May to June doubled, and now if June we're at 10,000. So if case rates double by the end of July, you'd have 20,000, and then by the end of August you'd have 40,000. If that rate continues, and we've been pretty consistently on that rate from the very beginning. You put that in a bubble situation, and it's even more potent. So. MLS, they got an issue. They got another issue too. After the break, not nearly as potentially life or death, but similar, frustrating in its own way. We'll put it that way. There's another one. I think you're gonna get a kick out of this. We'll talk about that when we return to the Family Leisure Studios. Real Sports Talk, Sports 56, 96.1, 87.7.
Listen online anywhere.
To Taylor Jenkins yesterday, CJ along with some of my closest pals in the media. It was nice to see everybody on the Zoom chat. Some folks looking great out there. Most folks looking good. Everyone's looking good. Some folks looking great.
All right.
But everybody's looking good. It's nice to see everybody, even if it is in the little boxes, and all that. And Taylor Jenkins was in very good spirits about the whole thing, and it's interesting. And I asked him about kind of the timing of all this, because it's basically you've had an off season. I mean, it's been 3.5 months. That's an off season pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
And yet you're coming right back to do to play basketball. And not only play basketball, but you got to jump right back in and like be at your best, because you got to position yourself for the playoffs. Like maybe they'll do some scrimmages and that kind of thing preseason, sort of deal. But you got to, when you jump back and action starts, like you got to get on it. And you got like a different group. I mean, you've got a bunch of rookies who have played very well, but now have had what is essentially an off season, and they got to come right back. So they're not exactly rookies anymore. They're more kind of. He called it like kind of year 1.5 sort of thing. You've got Justice Winslow, who you're working into the mix. He says, and Ja talked about it, and he says it's he's seen it, and the players talked about it, that he's put on significant muscle, that you can tell a difference. He said a lot of the players have done that they've used this time to really work on their bodies and to build that kind of strength in the absence of being able to do the sort of basketball work that you would normally do. And he feels he seemed to be very confident, CJ, about the condition of the players going in. Did not comment on any COVID situation in the group, so don't know about that. But everyone is planning on going down to Orlando, all the coaches and players at this point in
time. That Ja Morant thing is, we talked about it in passing yesterday, but understand that Ja and Jaren are 20, and their bodies are still changing. Ja Morant right now is a force to be reckoned with. When he gets his grown man body, it's going to be different. He's just going to be a different sort of thing entirely. Same with Jaren. Jaren can get pushed around some on the block, but when he gets that body, when he gets that body coming into the footwork that he's already going to have, because he's getting beat up now, he's learning how to get in position to try and take advantage of his length. When he gets stronger, though, like that defensive rebounding thing that's been an issue may not be one. Like that, you got to give these guys time to grow, and that's scary. Scary good for Grizzlies fans, just scary for everybody else in the NBA. When you think about the fact that these guys, their bodies are still changing, and they're not the grown men yet, and still able to go out there and put up the numbers they are at a really, really high level consistently night in, night out. This is huge, and it is a completely different team. And they are going to have to find a way to work Justice Winslow into the mix. But with the IQs of everybody around, that's one of the things that the Grizzlies targeted. We've talked about it often on this show. You've made mention of it a time or two on the show and on the Twitter sphere and in your articles. Like the players they targeted were players with high basketball IQs. So, and Justice Winslow seems to fit that mold. So they'll be able to find a way, I feel like, quickly to get him integrated and implement him and his skill set into what they want to do offensively and defensively. And that's just not going to be fair, because everybody's got, like 8 games? Eight games to try and work out some kinks and get up to speed. Well, now you're not playing these same Grizzlies. You're playing a different sort of Grizzlies basketball team. And the same old Grizzlies from the season before the season got stopped was a pretty good team. Mm-hmm. Now you throw in this unknown, like it's going to take you a while to adjust to that. This could be huge for them.
It really is going to be interesting to see how it goes. It could go a number of different ways, depending on how quickly guys get acclimated. It could be a huge boost. It could be a little bit of a problem if you've got guys who don't quite, maybe Justice Winslow doesn't quite get up to speed quickly enough. Maybe the chemistry just isn't there. Maybe those guys didn't the lack of basketball really threw them off. Maybe as young players, they lost a little bit. They're not quite as, the approach is not as focused as it needs to be. There's all sorts of things. Or it could be they come back and Justice Winslow uses that time to really get perfectly integrated into the mix faster than he would have otherwise. He was going to jump in there March 12th when the game was canceled against Portland. He was slated to be in the lineup, and they were going to have to work him in on the road, tough play, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Now you've got a training camp. Now you got off season. Now you got all this time to work him in. Maybe you add, maybe Ja Morant has added, 12 pounds of muscle on top of maybe Jaren Jackson's added some muscle. Maybe those guys come back stronger. Maybe Justice Winslow is worked in because of the training camp. Maybe you even see Grayson Allen, who we thought was out for the season, but he's gonna travel there, and he's going to he's gonna travel. We'll see. He was certainly ruled out because we didn't think the season was going to go into July and August, but he's not. I don't think he's been ruled out at this point. Even Jontay Porter is going to travel down there and be in the mix, and he's coming back.
Mm-hmm.
And according to Taylor Jenkins, is working with the group and is in an interesting place. So I doubt you would see him, but it's not beyond the realm of possibility. At the very least, he's getting a great opportunity to work with the rest of the team and to kind of get into the flow of what they want to do, which is going to be really valuable for him going forward. And if he's healthy, obviously the huge question when you have 2 ACL injuries in the same knee, that's a devastating situation. Mm-hmm. But if he's healthy, I loved him as a college player. I mean, really bright, sharp guy. Just a matter of, wonderful player, super feel for the game. Not a great athlete anyway, so it's not like the knee injury is going to
mm-hmm.
Take away that elite athleticism, because that did not exist, his elite athleticism.
Right.
But that's kind of an interesting little wild card. I don't think it's going to be played, but it's out there. So I would say overall they a lot of good spirits from Taylor Jenkins and the group.
That's good. That was refreshing to hear as they head down to the bubble to try and compete for that 8th spot and make some noise in the playoffs potentially. But this is huge. We talked about the end of the season before it got paused. We talked about what it would mean for this core group of young players to play meaningful basketball games late in the season and maybe even get into the playoffs, and how that could jumpstart and really accelerate their growth and development. And this is, now that the season's restarting, this is one of those situations where this helps your growth. Young teams led by a rookie and a couple of second-year players, a couple of rookies, a couple of second-year players, and a third-year player, they're not supposed to do this. You're not supposed to be in contention for playoff berths. You're not supposed to have the season go on and be a 500 basketball team for the most part. We talked about the struggles that they had right before the season got paused with the loss to the Clippers, and then the blowout loss to the Lakers, and then the blowout loss to the Rockets. And before those 3 games, a loss on the road to the Kings. It was like, okay, this is rough. Maybe the Grizzlies are going to come back down to reality a bit. And then you look up, and shorthanded, they knock off those Lakers at home. They blow that Lakers team out. So this is, from a growth and development standpoint, we know what they've looked like so far this season, but for next season and the seasons after that, experience like this could really go a long way in helping them reach heights that the city of Memphis hasn't seen before.
Well, this is the thing with young teams and really with all teams now. Unpredictability is the name of the game. You really don't know. That sequence that you talked about when they had lost 5 straight and looked like they were really on the ropes, and then you saw Ja Morant put on a clinic. I mean, it was a spectacular performance from Ja. That was huge. That was huge for the team, and they've had their ups and downs, and they've had games where they've really come out and disappointed. Like at the very end of the season, the last game they played before the shutdown was the home loss to Orlando. Did not play very well in that game. So you're going to have a variable type of performance. But this idea that the Pelicans have just shot into being the favorites in so many places, and a lot of that is Zion based, and people want to bet on Zion and all that stuff and the odds. That he gets that same bump that you see from like Duke and Notre Dame and stuff. You just people know the name, and so they want to bet on him. I get that New Orleans' schedule is easier. It was always going to be easier, but I do feel like there's a little function of disrespect for the Grizzlies here, a little bit. And I don't like to play the disrespect card that much, but I do think there is a little bit of that disrespect going on. I think people have kind of forgotten about what the Grizzlies are all about. I think they weren't paying that much attention other than just the highlights they saw of Ja, and they didn't see what this team was capable of at its best. It's going to be a healthier group. Jaren Jackson Jr. should be back. Brandon Clark should be back. Justice Winslow. All the other injuries we mentioned, maybe even Grayson Allen, Jonte Porter. I don't see why they would be. I mean, it's going to be hard for them not to end up in the 8th or 9th position. But that 8th spot, I mean, it would really send a message. I'll say that third game against New Orleans would really send a message if the Grizzlies can win it. If the Grizzlies can win that game. I mean, those first 3 against Portland, San Antonio, and New Orleans are huge. And the one against New Orleans in particular.
Another part of the reason that people are favoring New Orleans is the fact that the Pelicans have beat the Grizzlies 2 times already this year, and they're 2-0 against the Grizzlies. Now, at least one of those games, I can remember them being shorthanded because of Jaren Jackson Jr. standing up on the bench after that skirmish popped off in New York. But so that is out there as well. And you're right, they've got to be able that third game against the Pelicans, they've got to be able to knock them off, and beating the Pelicans would go a long way. You need to be at full strength against that team and against everybody for the rest of the season. And by full strength, I mean corona free. So I hope that they are social distancing and they are in their own little proverbial individual bubbles in Memphis. Because what you don't want to happen is we've seen what the Grizzlies and the Pelicans look like shorthanded, and how the Pelicans were able to manipulate matchups to really take advantage of some of the things that particular version of the Grizzlies really couldn't handle. And what you don't want is another one of those type situations where you're shorthanded this time because of the coronavirus, and the Pelicans are able to take advantage of you there. And the Pelicans are a team that has 3 cases that we know of so far. So listen, if this restart and playoff push may come down to who can keep the coronavirus away from their roster for the longest. And so if the Grizzlies can find a way to do that, I mean, they should be in pretty good shape. I would feel like to at least get that 8th seed.
We'll see. I mean, basically 3 and 5 gets them a playoff or a play-in spot, guaranteed. And if they can win the right 3, they're definitely in business. 4 or more, and they're in real good shape for the 8th seed. So, it's largely in their hands. It's not an easy schedule, but it's largely in their hands, which certainly helps. You know what else is largely in your hands? Ribs. Those are largely in your hands until they're in your mouth. Now, Zach, I apologize.
I don't. And he's holding his hands out like
he's holding his hands out
ribs.
like he wants some ribs. I mean, I wish.
No, I'm looking at my hands like, okay, like what can I substitute for ribs? Like
nothing.
Vegan ribs.
Nothing. No, don't do yourself. Don't do that. No, nothing at all.
They got turnip greens. Put the greens right in there and just plop them in each hand, and just there you go. Just mac and cheese in one hand, greens in the other, like that.
Like what?
Like that right there. Just
like this.
Yep, that's right. Just go.
Okay. Okay. All right.
Just get in there.
Get in there.
That's
how you gotta eat it, man.
That's how you gotta get. It's good. It's really good. When something is delicious, CJ, you just gotta get after it. You can't. Why are you stopping? Why you got to go. You got to get all face
first in that macaroni and cheese.
That's right. And in those ribs.
And in those ribs. Scrooge McDuck dive into them.
Oh, half slab, full slab. Let's go. You can get it wet, dry, half and half, whatever you want. Those smoked wings are huge and wonderful, fantastic. Brisket, it's all there for you. It's all there for you. The sides, the desserts, the whole thing. It's just great. For a dine-in, if you want, or curbside, you can even have it delivered. That's up to you, and it's super easy. EatCBQ.com. That's how you find them. EatCBQ.com. And go find them at any of the locations. They've got downtown, Central, Summer, East Memphis. They've been working hard throughout all of this to keep their folks taken care of, to keep you taken care of, to keep you safe, and more importantly, to keep you even happy, healthy, eating that delicious food. It's there for you. Central Barbecue. Back after this. Real Sports Talk, Sports 56, 96.1, 87.7.
Spend your lunch with Greg Gaston and Eli.
Positive news. Like Maya Moore, who a remarkable story of her persistence in trying to help Jonathan Irons, who was wrongly convicted of burglary and assault with a weapon, and his conviction had been, was wrongly convicted. Took way longer than it needed to for all this thing to happen. She put her career on hold with the Lynx to try to push this through and to make this thing happen. And yesterday, it finally happened. She's watching him, greeting him outside of prison, the correctional facility in Jefferson City, Missouri. That's where she's from. She's from Jefferson City. She met him even before her freshman year at UConn, and her godfather was the one that was reviewing a bunch of documents and really fighting for this man to be freed. 22 years of a 50-year sentence he served. He's 40, so he went in at 18, comes out at 40. But at least he's out. This is a heroic. You talk about using your voice for good. You talk about doing the right thing. You talk about not getting distracted. You talk about Maya Moore, man, is an absolute hero to everyone, and major kudos and credit to her. That's a wonderful thing.
Yeah, big ups to Maya Moore, and that's using your platform to elicit some real change in the world and do some real good. We saw Maya Moore step away from the WNBA to pursue, I think she said at the time, more acts of community service, and she's fulfilling that promise. That wasn't just words; those weren't just her just speaking. She's backing it up. So yeah, major applause and major kudos to Maya Moore for what she was able to do. Wonderful stuff.
Now, a very interesting turn of events potentially for one of my favorite teams, the Washington football team. We've talked about the silliness of that team name and how the Washington organization is saying, talking about proper representation and all this stuff, and it sort of rings hollow when you've got the kind of symbolism and name that Washington has and has held on to and refused to do a whole lot with. There have been a couple of moves that have happened in nationally that have opened up some eyes, and most notably yesterday, investors, 3 separate letters signed by 87 investment firms and shareholders worth a collective $620 billion, asked Nike, FedEx, and Pepsi to terminate their business relationships with Washington unless the team agrees to change its name. And have said that, PepsiCo, who is, they were the ones who decided to retire Aunt Jemima and that whole, that whole situation, because they felt like, it was wrong. It was sending the wrong message. It was the wrong discussion. It was the wrong thing to be doing. And they don't need to be doing that anymore. Caricaturing and all that stuff. They don't need to be in that business. Well, they said, well, you've done that, and that's a good step, but why are you in the business of supporting this team who's also caricaturing and who is, doing reductive discussions and all that stuff? Same thing with FedEx. Same thing with Nike, who's the apparel supplier. FedEx, obviously the name title sponsor of the field, FedEx Field. So, they're looking for a site to expand, and the site that they've looked at on the old RFK Stadium, Daniel Snyder is involved in trying to buy it, and the local government has said that unless you change the name, you cannot buy it. And so there's much more pressure than I've ever seen before, CJ, for a change like this to actually happen.
Yes, and this is again how you use your platform. We are all aware of the name of that football team. Awareness, we don't need any more awareness on that particular issue. Now we need people with some clout, some pull to throw their weight behind the issue, and that then elicits the change. We talked about the Black Lives Matters patch on the back of the University of Memphis helmet. And yes, while that is good, while that is cool, while that keeps it kind of in everybody's forefront, while people are aware that's going on, and it is a good way to show solidarity with your black players, you're the University of Memphis. Now, you guys have the clout and the ability to elicit some real change in this area. And it's no longer about awareness. It's about going out there, and in the case of PepsiCo, they are aware now. It's no longer about helping to raise that awareness. It's about using your platform and using the billions that you have and the power that you have by having those billions to get some of these things changed. And for the University of Memphis, it would look differently. For the University of Memphis or another college, it would look like, hey, let's take a look at our curriculum. Are we really telling the history of this nation in the right way? One, are we getting books in our English department that show a diverse background and different points of views? That's two. What does this mean for our minority students and our student body as a whole? Let's do that study. Okay, now let's take that study to local superintendents and school districts and show, hey, this is why you should have more diverse voices in your English curriculum and why you should be telling history this way in your history and social studies departments. That's what this means, and that's how you then elicit that real change. Awareness gets you so far. Now, once you're aware, you've got to actually do something about it, and I'm glad to see that PepsiCo and others appear to be doing something about the nickname up in Washington.
It remains to be seen if Daniel Snyder will actually be persuaded to make this change. It's ultimately going to be his call. He's been very stubborn about this in the past, has not even wanted to have a discussion about it, much less anything else. So, money talks, and this is how you're going to have to put that kind of pressure on him to make that change. It's been something that I know most of us. Well, I can't say most of us. There's a large group of fans who don't want it to happen. And I think there's an increasingly large number of fans that do. And it's tough for us who, you sort of got indoctrinated into following the team as a kid, and you didn't think really about what that meant, what the nickname. You didn't give any more thought to it. And then as you get older and you start to realize what is being done and the caricaturing and belittling and that kind of thing, it's deeply disrespectful, and it seems to some like a little thing, but it's not. It's a big deal. And now, what do you do? It's hard because you're a fan of the team. It's just it creates a mess. It would be so much nicer to not have to worry about that with this. And I hope that there will be there'll be a way to figure this out. I've always said that I saw somebody, this was a long time ago, and my solution to the CJ was always calling them the Red Clouds, because Red Cloud was a Sioux chief who his I think it's his grandchildren or great grandchildren are still alive and still have contact and have expressed interest in having him be honored in that way. And if you do it the right way, and if you do it in a respectful way, honoring one particular person in the way that you've seen some team names honoring people, I think you could turn a negative into a positive. You could acknowledge the wrong that you've done and try to turn it in the right way in order to make it happen. I've always thought that might be a unique solution to try to be respectful rather than to be caricaturing and disrespectful.
I'd be cool with that if that family is cool with it. But like you that nickname can't still be rocking after 2020. Like that is one of those things that needs to change. Just like Confederate flags coming off of state flags, just like the the monuments being taken down, that nickname's got to go. Chiefs is cool. You don't see this going on with the Chiefs. So it's not that Native Americans or that others don't want, Native Americans honored in that way or discussed in that way. But when you have that derogatory nickname, that slur with the character on top of all of that, that can exist. There are a lot of sports programs, franchises that have Native American nicknames and ties. So the Seminoles are still rocking as well down in Florida State, the Braves in Atlanta. We aren't even, the Cleveland Indians. Once they got rid of the character, it seems like everything sort of died down a bit, even with them. You can't have that name in the nation's capital and have the character attached to it. It's time for a change, and I'm glad that people are stepping up using their stage that they have for meaningful change.
That's just keep an eye on that one. That's one that needs Bears watching over the next few days and weeks. Some other things bear watching as well as some of the new numbers coming out this morning. Not necessarily super promising. We'll discuss that when we return on the other side. Real Sports Talk, Sports 56, 96.1, 87.7.
Take Sports 56 with you on your phone or tablet.
The need to have them there, I guess. If anything, maybe the Mike Breen team that's going to be doing the finals, you bring them in just basically for the finals when there's you've obviously eliminated most of the people in the bubble already, but I don't see why you would really need announcers there.
That would be legendary if we can get Kevin Harlan inside the bubble and he's calling a basketball game while at the same time he has like a TV monitor with the football or the baseball going on like he did during the Kansas Chiefs game. That would be legendary.
And he could pull it off. But
the thing is with Harlan, if he's in one of those gyms doing a game and there's no fans, everybody in there is going to hear him.
That's true.
Because when he gets excited, like he gets loud, like everybody it'll be echoing through that gym. The players will all know exactly what he's saying.
Yeah, we're always talking about what the players are going to say, and that the possibility of a slight delay because the players may be saying some words that you don't want to be heard. You don't want kids to hear that you don't want to heard or said, I should say. But with the announcers, not worried about that. But you're absolutely right. You didn't even think about how loud the announcing could be with the players hearing the announcers. Now, a guy like Marv Albert, yes, and it counts. He may not be there because of his age. I think he's 79. Is Marv that old? But
he's old.
They're worried about some of the coaches being there at their ages. And then what about Hubie Brown? Is Hubie going to be in the bubble? I mean, God bless Hubie Brown, but he's like 120.
Yeah, keep Hubie at the house.
I mean, come on now. So I don't think they're going to bring them, but I'm not 100% sure. But you're right about the announcers. If they're there, it will be echoing through the arena. But I just think it's stupid. Why add more people into the bubble?
Yeah, again, I mean, the only thing I would see is if you wanted to bring Breen and Van Gundy and Jackson in there for the finals. Mm-hmm. But other than that, I don't even see why that would be necessary. But if you wanted to, obviously, by that time you're down to only 2 teams remaining. You could bring them in. So, but I don't see the need to have announcers on site.
Look, like I said, as a play-by-play guy, and you and I, Eli, look, I've actually done an event remotely. It's weird as hell, but the preference would be to be at the arena, to be at the stadium. I understand, to be on the course, but these times have changed. I know that all the regional broadcasts, including our friends with the Grizzlies, will be doing it from their studio. And I guarantee it will sound great because they're professionals. They know what they're doing. The only problem would be if there was just some technical snafu where they couldn't see the product, they couldn't see the game. Then it's a disaster. But other than that, I mean, guys that know what they're doing, calling a game, you don't want all these people in there in this bubble. You're trying to limit the amount of people that are in the bubble.
I would imagine if they do have them there calling games, they're not going to be their normal courtside position. They'll have some. They'll keep them up away from the players and the coaches and everything else. Some will find somewhere to set them up to actually broadcast the game.
You would think. You would think that makes sense. But, I mean, everybody, some of the things I've read, like the bus drivers of the teams inside the resort, the guys that are going to be doing all that, even on their days off, they're allowed to go outside the bubble to their homes, but on their days off, they have to come in and get COVID-19 checks or tests. So they're getting tested probably every day because they're coming from the outside. So if you can limit people, even those that would stay actually in the bubble. But again, it doesn't make a lot of sense for these guys who are also working other jobs, and eventually they're going to intertwine unless there is a delay in the start of the football season. Some, I think, do Major League Baseball as well as NBA? I know some do football. Do you know off the top of your head? Is Breen involved with baseball at all?
No, I don't believe so.
Okay. There may be one or two. So anyway, that's an interesting story I saw yesterday. From the NFL, they announced, and again, I don't think this was a surprise, that they're cutting down the normal 4 preseason games to 2. People think that should be it normally, but there was no question that we weren't going to have 4 preseason games.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know why honestly, to me, they could have cut it to 1 or something. I don't. In this situation, I think it's obvious that you don't need to be playing. You don't need to play any more preseason games that are absolutely necessary.
They already had canceled the Pro Football Hall of Fame game, the Pro Football Hall of Fame ceremony, moving that to 2021 and being a part of that 2021 deal, making a 2-day ceremony with 2020 and then 2021. But teams report July 28th, so we're a little over 3 weeks away. And then the preseason games would start August 20th through the 24th. That'd be that first weekend or week of the games. And then the second week after that. And then the NFL regular season would start 2 weeks after that. So you have a limited amount of playing time for these guys. So what do you think that does to the starters, the first teamers on the depth chart as far as those 2 games? What do you expect?
Very little.
Still very little.
Yeah.
Like first quarter, and then you pull them out for the rest.
You don't think they go one of those games, they go like 3 quarters?
I would say they may play I would think one of them they maybe play 2 or 3 series, if that, and then the other one maybe play a half.
So normally they would play, game 2? Nearly the full game? Or game 3? What would it normally be? I'm trying to remember.
I think game 3 is like the normal situational for them.
Like a dress rehearsal.
Like a full dress rehearsal. All the players are going to play. Then game 4 is typically like, all right, let the guys that are not going to make the team, let them go out and play and see if anybody wants to make the team or not.
So you wouldn't think, Eli, that game 1 of the 2, the starters would play a good 3 quarters and then sit out, and then the second game, the final game of the preseason, if you will, they'd play maybe a quarter or a few snaps?
I would not think they play much at all. I mean, we've seen a lot of the last few years. I mean, there's a lot of guys who have not played at all in the preseason.
Mm-hmm.
I think in this, the fact that you only have 2 games, if you've got your battles trying to figure out who's going to make your team, you want as much time to look at those guys as you know what your starters are. You're trying to figure out who else is making your team, and you got very limited time with 2 preseason games.
So you don't worry about the fact that you didn't have the OTAs, you didn't have all that off-season stuff that you normally would have, the voluntary workouts by players, a lot of them deciding to do it most of the time, but players getting together, then the official OTAs. You won't have any of that stuff. You think you get enough time in the 3 weeks which will actually be more than 3 weeks now with the camp. Well, no, it would be 3 weeks.
And it may differ by team, but depending on whether you've got a new coach, new system, how many new players you have, do you have a new quarterback? I mean, some of those teams may decide to play their guys a little bit more just because they need to get familiar. But if you've got pretty much the same team returning, same coaches, staff, same quarterback, what do you? I mean, we know what we're doing, and we know what these guys are.
Right now, the only thing that I would bet on happening in sports is that the NFL season will start on time. I don't think I would be able to put my money on anything right now other than that. Even the start of the NBA resumption later this month, I don't feel great where I would put my own money on it. I think it'll happen. Same with baseball. But to bet that the baseball season will go the full 60 games, to bet that the NBA will have a conclusion with a championship, I wouldn't bet on it. Now, I'm not saying that the NFL doesn't have an interruption or a conclusion. I still think eventually we're going to have a Super Bowl. But I do believe right now the only thing I would bet on is the NFL moving forward and playing opening weekend. College football, which I felt so confident about, I still lean towards the season starting on time. Don't get me wrong. But, man, with every passing day, with every story, the latest being the USC story, we'll see if other schools follow suit, and there will be less and less students on campus when it looked like it was going to be back to, I don't want to say normal because it's never going to be normal again, but back to the usual student in the classroom as opposed to the student taking the courses online.
When I asked you to rank the sports the most likely to start and finish the season as planned, didn't you put the NFL third?
I did.
Now you're telling me it's the only one you're confident in?
Yes, because things change on a daily basis. They change on an hourly basis. I don't like the news that I'm reading. I don't like what I'm hearing out there about.
But what changed you about the NFL? Why weren't you confident in the NFL then? What has made you more confident in the NFL now?
No, I was confident in the NFL, but I ranked it third because the NBA and Major League Baseball were going to have shortened seasons that would conclude much earlier than the NFL season would conclude. Thinking that maybe we would have the second wave towards Christmas or sometime after Thanksgiving. So my thought was, the NBA zips in 8 games, regular season for each team that's in there. Play the postseason, zip out. Nothing's going to be a zip in, zip out now. Nothing. As far as baseball is concerned, I'm like 60 games. Baseball is still, to me, not exactly like golf, but more like golf than it is football. In other words, there's some contact in baseball, and I know you're touching the ball and all that, but you could space out a little bit. You're sitting around for half the inning, so it's not the same. It's not the same with basketball, man, where you're on the court, knocking around each other, spits flying, all kinds of stuff going on. You're coughing, you're hacking, you're wearing shorts. I mean, it's just like a free-for-all of COVID-19. Football, obviously, you got the uniforms and all that stuff, but, man, you're right in the face of each other. I think with baseball, you can space out a little bit. So that was my thought. 60 games, okay, we can get this done. NBA is going to be quick. We can get this done. I like the NFL. It's just I thought I got to put somebody third because I felt so confident in the other two. Now I don't feel as confident with the NBA, especially Adam Silver coming out the other day and saying, hey, look, if there's a rash of positive tests, we'll have to shut it down. So him saying that, and then baseball, again, I still feel confident. But the NFL is going to start. I almost guarantee the NFL opening weekend there's going to be the regular schedule. But what's going to happen thereafter, I don't know. And as far as fans, I don't know either.
The NFL will go on as planned. Like they don't, because they don't care. I don't think they care about fans. Like if they don't have fans, it doesn't matter to them.
Right.
It's all about the TV money. So the NFL is going to play unless basically being forced to somehow shut it down because it just like got so bad they can't, like teams can't even field a full team.
Right. No, you're absolutely right. Speaking of baseball, the Detroit Tigers today announced a multi-year deal with Sportsbook PointsBet, the first such partnership between a Major League Baseball franchise and a bookmaker. How about that? How about baseball getting into the 21st century?
Well, and Rob Manfred had a idiotic comment yesterday. Rob Manfred continues to say some things that I just don't understand. We'll get to that coming up. We've also got some text messages that we will get to coming up in just a little bit.
Also, 2.5 questions. And Eli, early in the Rocket Mortgage Classic, it's Doc Redman. He shot a 7 under. I told you. Somebody should have taken him yesterday. Now, our good friend Dan Wolken, national columnist for USA Today Sports. You can follow him on Twitter at Dan Wolken. Dan, how are you?
I'm all right. How are you guys?
I'm good. So I saw the numbers. I was watching national news last night, and they're talking about different states where the numbers are just going up. And, of course, here in Memphis, they're going up, in Tennessee. And then I saw Georgia. So what's it like in Atlanta?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely been like a lot of other places in the Southeast where the growth is concerning. But I kind of stay in and try to avoid crowds, avoid going out too much, and just kind of do my own thing.
Yeah, which is the smart thing to do. Unfortunately, not everybody out there is intelligent, and I understand that. I don't want to demean anybody because we've had a lot of people that talk about their civil liberties being violated, and other people have health issues why they can't wear masks. But the parties and the things, the beachgoers and the people that are coming together with just massive amounts of people, it's certainly not helping the cause. And now there just seems to be the battle cry, whether it be from Phil Fulmer or other people. If you want to see college football, wear your mask. And a lot of stories written, you've written about it, other people have written about it nationally, about where we are. We're now in July. I mean, the college football season is right around the corner. Are we going to have college football?
Well, we're definitely up against the clock. That's the thing. For months and months, all we heard was there's plenty of time, time's on our side. We'll get this figured out. But now, we're up here on July 2nd, and practice is supposed to start in a couple of weeks. So, you kind of are in this position now where the cases are going up, players are still testing positive, schools still don't have a great handle on how this is all going to work, especially when you start adding, kids back to campus, and you just sort of wonder whether they're going to run out of time, and whether in a couple weeks we're going to need to revisit this and maybe make some tough decisions about moving the season back.
The news that came out of USC today about most of their classes being online, does that concern you more there too?
Yeah, I mean, look, this is going to be a domino effect, and the Ivy League is going to announce next week what they're going to do. There's an expectation that the Ivy League is going to move their sports to spring, including football. If that happens, how does that affect some other schools? It's not necessarily going to track exactly the same because Ivy League football is FCS. It's not the same sort of financial incentive as the SEC, ACC, Big Ten, but those presidents have a lot of credibility with other college presidents. They were also first to shut down basketball, and it turned out they were prescient on that. So I think that'll have some influence. And then what happens if you start getting places like USC or a Stanford or a Michigan who just says, look, we can't do this in the fall. And then are you going to have the rest of the country just power through, especially given, Texas and Florida, where it's just going to be a real challenge. So yeah, I'm less hopeful than I was. I think it's going to be really tough to get this going on time.
If we knew, if we could pull out a crystal ball, and we know that there's going to be issues in the fall. So as a whole, the decision is spring football, and we know that there's going to be no issues as far as COVID-19. Again, I'm dreaming here, but if we knew that on the surface, and you had spring football, what bad comes out of it? In other words, having it at that time of the year, NFL, draft, spring football, things of that nature, what bad comes out of having a spring season as opposed to a fall season?
Well, I mean, yeah, there's complications. There'd be a lot of players, especially guys who are looking at the NFL draft, who would probably just not play. The NFL's not going to move their draft. That's been made clear to the conferences. There's certainly the possibility. I think there's concern that having kids play 2 seasons in one calendar year would be viewed poorly by the public. That college athletics would take a beating for that. I think there's ways to sort of offset some of these concerns. I think TV, becomes a little more complicated in the spring, but if you have to do it, then you have to do it, and you're just going to have to figure it out.
If we couldn't do it in the fall, and let's say they can't do it at all, I mean, how many of these, like when you're talking Power 5 schools, how decimating would it be to them financially?
Well, look, there's been people who've run numbers on it, and depending on the school, I mean, it's tens of millions of dollars. Now, there are some schools at the Group of 5 level even who, if you didn't have football, they'd actually probably save money in a sense, because they are subsidized by the university, by student fees, and they lose money on football. They don't turn a profit, but at the same time, it would trigger a major shutdown in a lot of other things across the athletic department and other sports, and there's an effect on that would probably force a lot of these athletic departments to get a lot smaller. And obviously for the SECs, I mean, that you're talking about tens and tens and tens of millions of dollars in ticket sales and donations that would just be gone.
There would also be nothing coming in for the schools in the non-Power 5, and that could be doomsday for some of those programs if there's nothing coming in. I don't know how they survive. You already have today Boise State announcing they've cut a couple sports, including baseball. Other schools have cut sports. Some have not had to do anything yet, including the University of Memphis. But even a power school like Oklahoma yesterday, cutting $13.7 million from their athletic department. So it's a loss all around if we don't have it. That's why I think they're going to try to power through this thing and do it even at the expense of having a lot of positive tests. The thing I'm worried about, Dan, and I've been saying this now for a couple of months, is what about when the students return to campus? We have the student athletes being tested, but what about the students? And now you have USC, as you guys talked about earlier, announcing that most of the classes will be online again. How can you have student athletes on campus practicing, even if they're taking online classes, and then playing games if students aren't there? So I'm confused in both avenues about the students not being there. How can you continue and have sports? And then if the students are there, what about all those students coming in having not tested?
Yeah, it's a difficult problem. I mean, maybe they'll move the goalposts and they'll try to continue to play even if there's no regular students on campus. I don't put anything past them to try to get the season in, but it all sort of goes hand in hand. I mean, whether there's students on campus or there's not students on campus, it's very clear that it's difficult to run your football program without having significant issues with the virus. Now, there are some schools that have not had any infections or have not reported any infections, but most schools, have had some, and they're going to have to test rigorously regardless, because when you have one or two people in the program and you start doing contact drills and real practice, preparation for games, that thing's going to spread like wildfire, and you're going to have to sit down huge parts of your team for a couple weeks. And that's the kind of season you don't want to have.
Right.
So that's why I just think time, is an asset in this thing. And as we get into July, they're kind of running out of it.
Yeah. When do you think they would have to be able to, if they were going to postpone the start of the season, when do they need to make that decision by?
I mean, I don't know how you could go much past August 1st. I mean, I don't think you can just do it the night before.
Yeah.
And there's teams, by the way, who are supposed to play week 0. That Saturday at the end of August, and one of those teams is Arizona, and Arizona, is in the middle of the arguably the biggest hotspot in the country, and I don't know how they're going to be ready on time. So, like, these are these are not coordinated decisions.
Right.
Like, everything is sort of piecemeal, but there's just a lot of little indicators that things are kind of it's just going to be hard to get this off on time.
Dan Wolken, national columnist for USA Today Sports, joining us here on the program. You can follow him on Twitter at Dan Wolken. Moving on to another topic, I'm sure, like most of us, if not all of us, are delighted with what has happened in Mississippi. It shows you really the strength of not only the player's voice, but obviously the coaches who came out in Mississippi and got legislation to be changed. But I think you've written about this, and correct me if I'm wrong, Dan. It may have been somebody else, but now Mississippi's got to look at some things as well as far as names are concerned and changes that need to be made. Was that you that wrote about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's very clear that the history of Ole Miss has been troubled by the imagery around the program that is clearly linked to the Confederacy. They have gotten rid of Colonel Reb. They've gotten rid of playing Dixie. They've gotten rid of the Confederate flag. Well, the reason all those things were associated with the program is because of the original sin, which is that the nickname Ole Miss Rebels is venerating the Confederate soldiers who, fought against the United States. And we are now in a time and in an era where we are reevaluating as a society why that is worthy of being celebrated. And we're making a collective decision, state by state, monument by monument, that it's not worth it and that we need to sort of rid ourselves of that. And I just personally think it's hard to separate Ole Miss Rebels from that very thing. But that is a topic that gets a lot of people really, really upset. But, I just think it's going to continue to be there and be a problem until you fix it.
The University of Memphis, Coach Ryan Sofield, they're going to be wearing the BLM stickers on the helmets this year. Do you expect to see a lot of teams around college football, whether it be a helmet sticker or something, doing something with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're seeing more possibility or openness to using the field of play to talk about social justice issues or messages. There's been talk about that at the NBA level. There's going to be talk about that at the college level. And yeah, I mean, I think, if the Memphis team decides that's what they want to do and that is meaningful for them to have that on their helmet, I don't think anyone is going to stand in the way of that. And we'll see if other teams do something similar. And I think it's something that could catch on, because I think even if we can return to sports somewhat normally, I think there's people who rightly don't want these issues that we've been talking about for the last couple months to just disappear.
Yeah, I hate that it's so heavy, this conversation we're having with you, but it's the way it is right now, especially in the sports world, and that's what we're concerned with. We're talking with Dan Wolken, national columnist for USA Today Sports. A couple of other things, Dan, before we let you go. Yesterday on the Hill, on Capitol Hill, the name, image, likeness theme came up with a lot of representatives from Keith Carter, Ole Miss, to Greg Sankey, the commissioner of the SEC, talking to the politicians, them asking the questions. Kind of a fact-finding mission, I think, overall for the politicians. Where are we with that? Are we going to be on the same page, you think, when it is actually enacted?
Oh, gosh. I mean, look, so there's now very clearly this pushback from within college athletics to this idea that name, image, and likeness is just going to be kind of wide open, almost anything goes, which is kind of where it looked like it was headed when the group within the NCAA, the working group, made their recommendations.
Mm-hmm.
The NCAA and a lot of these conferences and schools clearly want an antitrust type of exemption. They want the government to impose limits and guardrails because the schools have not been able to effectively do it themselves. And, will Congress bail them out? I have absolutely no idea. I think it's going to be tough. I think there's a lot of other things going on in the country right now, and I think coming to a consensus on this is going to be difficult. But yeah, it's just an evolving story, and the whole name, image, and likeness issue. I kind of thought we were of the mind that this is something we got to do as an industry, that there's really no other choice. But now, people like Greg Sankey are trying to muddy the waters and appeal to, this idea that we have to protect amateurism in some way. And I just don't know if that's going to work.
Dan, what these penalties handed down to Texas A&M today, including Jimbo Fisher and an assistant coach who is, I guess, Jay Graham, who's now actually at Tennessee. It includes a show cause for Jimbo Fisher and for Graham. But what does a show cause mean for a coach who's employed, and what do we make of these penalties given to Texas A&M?
Yeah, I don't know exactly what it's going to entail, and I've been working on something else today, so I have not been able to read the fine print on everything that it entails. But yeah, it's never good when you have the NCAA coming on your campus, and all this started with an article that I wrote in August of 2018, where a former Texas A&M player who was transferring alleged that Jimbo Fisher and that staff had been holding illegal workouts and had provided a decent amount of evidence of that. And it drew the NCAA's attention, and the NCAA started investigating, and they found some stuff. And that's never, it's never what you want. I don't think Jimbo Fisher is going to get fired, but I believe he is banned from doing off-campus recruiting for a while, which, of course, nobody's off-campus recruiting right now. So that may not turn into that meaningful of a penalty. But there's, you don't want to be in this situation. That's for sure. They've gotten, at least a slap on the wrist for this stuff.
Normally, this is a slow time of the year, and while sports really not happening, but will be happening soon, back on the field, back on the diamond, back on the courts eventually, there is still story after story after story, from this breaking Texas A&M story to what's going on with Iowa to what's happening at Kansas State. Boy, Dan does an unbelievable job in following just about everything that's happening here in collegiate sports and national things as well with professional sports. When he needs to chime in, he certainly does. He's a great follow. He goes back and forth with his followers, which I love. I think that's been something I've enjoyed, being pent up in my house, is watching you, Dan, on Twitter or reading you on Twitter. He's the national columnist for USA Today Sports. He is Dan Wolken. Follow him on Twitter at Dan Wolken. Dan, stay well. Always a pleasure, man. Take care.
All right. See you guys later. Thanks.
Okay. I'm telling you, they go after Wolken. Wolken comes right back at him. He is a very polarizing figure. Look, there's things that I certainly disagree with him about, but I know him well, having been a former writer and columnist for, actually covered the Memphis Tigers. I don't even know if he was a columnist for the Commercial Appeal, but always enjoy Dan's insight. Again, don't always agree with that, but man, yeah, this Texas A&M story just kind of broke while he was on with us.
Yeah, it's reading here, trying to figure, because when I saw that Jimbo got a show cause, I'm like, what's it's a 6-month show cause.
Yeah, is he not coaching this year, his team?
But the terms of the show cause order include a previously served 9-day ban on phone calls, emails, or texts with prospects in January of 2020, a reduction in off-campus recruiting contact days by 3 for the December 2019 through January 2020 contact period, a ban on all off-campus recruiting activities for the fall 2020 contact period. So he can do no off-campus recruiting this fall, but there may not be any off-campus recruiting this fall. So this could serve as, if you're ever going to have that suspension, this would be the time to have it, I guess.
Yeah, but I didn't know there were different levels of show cause.
Additional one-on-one rules education and a public statement from the head coach addressing the violations. It's the same thing for the assistant coach, which is actually Jay Graham, who's actually now at Tennessee.
Yes.
And he's got the exact same stuff other than the public statement, but he's got the same things as far as his 6-month show cause go. So Graham can do no off-campus recruiting this fall either for Tennessee.
Yeah, Jay Graham, former Tennessee Vols star running back who went to the NFL, played with the Baltimore Ravens. But I always thought the show cause meant like you were out, like there was no contact with you and the team. Like you couldn't get a job. Like you couldn't get a job.
A show cause generally comes for guys who are unemployed at that time.
Right. That's what I mean.
And what it is for a school to hire you, they have to show cause basically why they should be allowed to hire you. Well, if the guy's already employed, they don't have to show cause to why they should keep him employed. But these are the terms of this. And this is a 6-month show cause. It's not a
3-year
5-year deal
yes,
like we've
right.
seen on like the much more serious ones.
Right.
This is a 6-month deal. These are those are the terms of that show cause for these guys.
Yeah, like you said, it was always one of those deals where, okay, if you want to hire this person, you're doing it at your own peril.
Yeah, and that was the thing. Like you had to show cause, and then if you did, you better be prepared because if they get in trouble again, you're going to serve stiffer penalties.
Right. Wow, lots going on in the world of sports, even without the games being played. But again, right around the corner, we talked earlier about John Morant. He had the Zoom call today talking about the excitement that the Grizzlies have in getting back on the court and getting things going once again with the resumption of the season. When we come back, it's time for our 5 favorite songs segment. Again, today's topic is heart. You need the word heart in the title of your song. If you haven't texted in your list, what are you waiting for? Text it into the First Bank text line at 67129. If you're watching us live, you can message us at Sports56 WHBQ with your lists on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Periscope, and Instagram. We'll do that next. This is Middays on Real Sports Talk. Sports 56, 96.1 and 87.7.
Start your day with Sports 56 mornings.
That the baseball season will be completed, 60 games, postseason, World Series champion, no interruption.
That's a tough one. I'm of two minds on that. You know, part of me says there shouldn't be a season because of the pandemic situation and because of the risk we're exposing not only the players and coaches to, but also their families and essential workers. But part of me also believes that they're going to normalize people getting sick, and that the only thing that can stop that is someone dying, unfortunately. And so I don't really have a percentage to throw on that, but I think it's going to probably get grim. And unfortunately, I think at this point, there's nothing that's going to stop that from happening.
Mm-hmm.
What did you make of the comments yesterday by Rob Manfred saying that they were never going to play more than 60 games, and basically saying that all of the negotiating that went on early was really ridiculous because they were never going to agree to more than 60 games?
Yeah, I thought it was a heck of a comment to make because of a few reasons. You know, number one, the union could potentially file a grievance stating that the league and the owners did not negotiate in good faith about the maximum number of games, and here you have Manfred basically admitting that was the case. And the other aspect of it that I think was interesting is later on in the interview, he said, you know, these negotiations produced a suboptimal result, and that's what happens when the other side is looking at this as a conflict rather than a collaboration. And it's like, well, Manfred, you just said, you know, you guys weren't willing to move off no matter what. You know, maybe have a little self-awareness there. So, you know, it's kind of par for the course at this point. It's unfortunate that we continue to have to talk about, you know, this particular aspect of baseball. But, I mean, at this point, you know, it just seems like we're heading for a labor stoppage come 2022.
Maybe I'm a little naive. I don't cover the Major League Baseball like you do, RJ, but it always seemed like Manfred was kind of in the background, and it was all about, as far as commissioners are concerned, Roger Goodell, Adam Silver. They were out there. They were very outspoken. They were talking most of the time on the podium, and you never heard Manfred. Now all of a sudden, Manfred's guaranteeing seasons, even though the season actually will be played, and then doing what he did yesterday with that just stupid comments about the 60 games. What is it all of a sudden about Rob Manfred that he's jumping out here in the limelight?
Yeah, I don't have a good answer to that one. I think that I just think that it's such a problem with baseball that the commissioner works for the owners and that he's not actually someone who's kind of a third party, an unbiased third party who does what's best for the game. And I think it's unfortunate that, this has become the norm established by Bud Selig. I mean, people forget, but Bud Selig became commissioner while he was still part owner over the Brewers.
Right.
And, it's just really ridiculous. So I don't know why Manfred all of a sudden is in the press. Maybe it's just a matter of, the opportunity. NFL had its moment with the draft. NBA will have its moment and arguably had its moment because it was one of the first leagues coming back. And I don't know. It's just a weird situation. Like I said, I think the commissioner's role is really unfortunate, that it's basically a given that he's going to be the owner's puppet.
Yeah, I don't know what his approval rating would have been before this all started, but it feels like right now that he is the approval rating from fans for Rob Manfred would be extremely low.
Yeah, but unfortunately, the only thing that matters is that his approval rating with owners is high, and I don't know. I don't know. I've had people in the game speculate to me that he's going to stay through the next round of CBA talks, and then he's going to retire. And I say retire with scare quotes around it because, it didn't seem like he had the full support of owners based on some of the rumors you had about hardliners not wanting to even have a season. I know he downplayed that yesterday in that interview and said it was one or two owners concerned about health. And I got to say, I don't think they were concerned about health. I think there was other elements at play there, but that's baseball for you, right? Unfortunately, it's done a very good job of reminding us that it's a business over everything these past few months.
Camps opened up again yesterday, and I say again because obviously we had a spring training, and now we have basically a summer training. Have numbers been released, or maybe the tests aren't in yet, or at least the numbers from the tests? But I'm curious to see how many players for each organization test positive.
Yeah, I believe they're going to release something on Friday. So those numbers aren't out, and it's going to be a mess of a situation. I mean, the Phillies placed, I think, 4 players on the injured list for undisclosed reasons, and you're basically just inviting speculation, and it's really unfortunate. If you want to give the players privacy, give them privacy, but as it is, it seems like it's going to be just an absolute headache, and there's going to be no privacy granted to these players on who test positive.
Talking with R.J. Anderson from CBS Sports. So, R.J., if everything does go off as planned, we do have this 60-game season, we don't have any further interruption or anything else, is there any teams you think are helped by the really shortened season?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we actually answered this question last week on CBS Sports, and the team I picked was the Texas Rangers. And the reason for that is because, you look at the rotation, and they have Mike Minor and Corey Kluber and Lance Lynn and a couple of other veterans. And, if those over 60 games, you could conceivably see them make a run, right? Because that's a really good 1-2-3 punch in your rotation. And, when you look at their lineup, it's projected to not be very good. But over the course of 60 games, it's easier to have a veteran like Todd Frazier get on a really good run than it is to have him maintain that over 140 to 160 games. So I think that's one team I would highlight. And, there are other candidates out there like the Los Angeles Angels for some of those same reasons I just said about the Rangers when it comes to health and having some unexpected contributors step up over the shorter season. But, yeah, that's the team that jumps to mind for me is the Rangers.
Because of the expanded rosters and because of the abbreviated season, do we see a different approach in the way that the manager will handle his pitchers as far as the rotation?
Yeah, I think it would make sense, right? You don't want to well, keep in mind, though, the expanded rosters are only going to be around for the first few weeks of the season. You're going to have 30 to begin with, and it goes down to 28 2 weeks in, and then it goes down to 26 after that. Mm-hmm. But I think teams are going to be mindful of how they approach this season in terms of the pitching staff. I think you're going to see a lot of bullpen substitutions, for instance. I hate to say phantom injury list sense, but, yeah, I think you're going to see a team like the Los Angeles Dodgers abuse the injury list and make sure they're getting tons of pitchers in there. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see. And I could see a team like the A's running like a 6-pitcher rotation to keep their youngsters healthy and, try to keep them in line for the postseason should they reach it.
They can't borrow the term from the NBA, though. They can't use load management.
They can't, I guess.
So, what we've discussed is I know the Lions are out there in Las Vegas. So what's your projection on what the home run leader will hit this year?
Oh, geez. I think, what was the projection they put out there? Wasn't it like
19.5, I think was the one number I saw.
Yeah, I mean, I talked about the Rangers earlier. I don't know if Joey Gallo is going out there against pitchers who aren't quite in game shape. Couldn't you see him going on an absolute tear and getting over that 20 mark?
Yep.
It's so weird. It's so weird to think of 19 leading the league in home runs. By the way, what is this, the dead ball era? But you know, I don't know. I guess you could say 15 to 20. It wouldn't surprise me if somebody really does get hot and hits 20.
Because that's the thing I thought about too is like the whole season. You know, normally you've got the first month, and in some of these cities, you're playing in these cold weather situations where like it's hard to hit home runs. Now it's going to be from the get-go like you're in warm, hot weather and that ball's going to be flying.
Yeah, absolutely. And you got to remember, you know, they're not going to have the same kind of minor league depth they usually have. So there's a chance we're going to see a couple teams run out guys who just don't belong in the big leagues. And, you know, depending on the situation, they might have to wear one. And that could lead to some very crooked numbers on certain nights. So it's going to be a very weird season. It's going to, I don't know. If we get through it, it's going to be very weird looking back at it in 5 to 10 years.
National League, of course, will use the designated hitter. I brought up the name Pete Alonso yesterday. We were talking about players that, with the compacted schedule, getting a breather, getting a rest. Well, I could see him all of a sudden DHing a little bit for the Mets. So here's a guy certainly that can make a run at plus 20 home runs. But what's your thoughts on the National League using the DH and about the future of the National League using the DH?
Yeah, I'm fine with it. I know there are purists out there and traditionalists who don't want the DH in the National League, but from my perspective, I just don't really care for pitchers hitting. I know people talk about strategy, but to me, there's also an anti-strategy there. You always see guys bunt when they come up. It's kind of predictable. It's boring when they have to, take their 3 pitches and go sit back in the dugout, when there's nobody on base. And I think from the union's perspective, it makes sense to create those 15 new jobs, to keep veterans around, and also it gives some kids who maybe wouldn't otherwise get the chance to play. And, you talked about the Mets. Yeah, Pete Alonso is the first baseman, right? He's not going anywhere. Well, Dom Smith is a pretty good hitter, and he deserves a chance to play as well. So this gets Smith into the lineup more consistently. It should help with health-wise, keep guys healthy, let them DH instead of playing the field on, once a week or whatever. Yeah, I don't know. I think it's a positive, even if I can understand the traditionalist argument.
Are your favorites? Is it the Dodgers and Yankees? Who do you look at as the favorites?
Yeah, I think you have to go with the Dodgers and the Yankees. They have a ton of talent at the top of the rosters. They have depth. They have everything you want. If you're trying to pick, some dark horses who come out of the rest of the leagues, I guess you have to go with someone like, maybe Atlanta. They had kind of a decent offseason, didn't have a lot of star value added to their roster, but they have so much young pitching. If a few of those guys take a step forward, that's going to really change things for them. And then I think Minnesota is going to be fun to watch again. Same with Oakland. I kind of mentioned them in passing earlier, but they have a chance for a very good rotation full of youngsters. They have one of the best lineups in baseball. I think they kind of get slept on in that regard because of the park they play in. But, those are just a few other teams I'd throw out there.
RJ Anderson joining us, CBS Sports Major League Baseball writer. You can follow him on Twitter at R_J_Anderson. As far as I already asked about the DH in the National League, the runner on second base to begin extra innings. What about that gimmick?
I'm not a fan of that. Frankly, I'd be fine with ties after a certain length of game. That's the way the rest of the world does baseball, and I don't really see many people complain about that. But if you're going to do this, I think Bill James' website ran a suggestion yesterday that if you're going to do the runner on second or whatever thing, why not just revert to the previous innings runner situation at the end of the frame? So, for instance, say, the Dodgers leave the bases loaded in the bottom of the 10th. If there is a bottom of the 11th, then you would have the bases loaded to begin that frame. And then if they, end up not winning the run then, the next inning they would go back to empty bases or whatever. So I think there's variations that maybe would make this a little more interesting, but I'm not really a fan of it, frankly.
The traditionalist you talked about, that if you're a traditional that doesn't like the DH in the National League, that rule is going to have to make their head explode.
Yes, absolutely. And I just don't really see the value of it. I mean, I know we can talk about ending games sooner, preserving pitchers' health or whatever, but wouldn't ties accomplish both of that and be less convoluted?
But those traditionalists can't have ties either. A tie in baseball, heck, it's what ruined Bud Selig with the All-Star game. That's just an exhibition.
Yeah, I don't like either. I don't like either one, to be honest with you. But I hear what you're saying about the ties. I don't like it either way. I'm just like play it out. I understand they haven't played, but they've been to camp, and I know it's a short season. Just play the darn thing out. All right. One other thing I want to ask you about with the fan situation, because wasn't it Eli? Was it the Cubs owner that came out? The president who came out and said that, he's thinking maybe there'll be some games where there will be fans allowed in Chicago. Could we have a situation where some stadiums, some cities have fans, a low percentage, but some, and others don't? Or is this going to be no fans throughout the 60 games? What is your thought on that?
Yeah, I believe Major League Baseball is going to let the local governments decide that, and that can lead to some weird situations where, some teams don't have fans in the stands, and then you potentially have a Texas situation where they can have up to 50% capacity. And to me, that sounds like a horrible idea, especially given, the numbers in Texas. I mean, you really want 20,000 people in Houston Stadium and in Texas Stadium each night? I would say no, but, this is never going to happen. But from my perspective, this is just going to be a money grab by the owners who allow this. Mm-hmm. And if they want to allow fans in the stands, especially, 50% or whatever, they should be forced to sit out there with them. Otherwise, you shouldn't allow it. So it's going to be a craven money grab if they allow up to 50% fans, but, I have no faith in the owners not doing it.
And the Cubs did announce, or I don't know if they officially announced, but there was a report that the rooftops across the street are definitely going to be open for the Cubs home games.
Yeah, and again, I wouldn't want to sit there. I don't know. Maybe other people have everyone has their own risk tolerance and their own calculus for this thing, but I don't want this disease or virus, and I'm not taking any risks.
I hear you.
Potentially expose myself to it.
I hear you, and expose other people. That's the key. But I can guarantee you this: on the on those the seats across the street from Wrigley Field, I can guarantee you they're not going to go every other seat. I bet you they are jammed in there.
The rooftops are going to be 25% capacity.
Oh, okay. I'm wrong then.
That's what the city approval was 25% capacity.
Okay, so it's not as bad as I thought it would be. He is RJ. It's something.
Yeah. Better than I expected.
I wonder how the players, if at all, they care about some of the state, because I think you're absolutely right about a money grab, and if all of a sudden there's 50% fans at Wrigley or any other stadium for that matter, do the players like it? Do they care because now there's actual people out there around them, even though not next to them? I wonder how they would feel about it.
That's a good question. My guess is, no one likes playing in an empty stadium, so they probably like that aspect, but they would probably also say, you know what, didn't we just spend months arguing with the owners about how much they could afford to pay us because there were going to be no fans in the seats, and now, opening day is still 3 weeks away, if there is going to be an opening day, and they're already talking about letting, 25 to 50% fans in. Like, what happened here? What changed? Because certainly the pandemic hasn't hasn't improved, right? So what changed?
Well, and then, okay, because they want to not have everybody in the dugout, aren't some of the players going to be sitting in the stands?
Yeah, I believe that was part of the safety manual.
So where do they put how are they? I wonder how far back
are the bleachers?
Fans.
Right. I don't know. It's a good question because you would think that the owners would want those seats behind, home plate.
Yeah, the highest
seats closest to exactly the ones that are bringing the most money. Yes. It's kind of funny. It feels like we can track everything bad here back to money. That's kind of weird how that works out. But I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see. And I do know that at one point, the proposal was that the players who were not expected to appear would be sitting in the stands, 6+ feet away from each other.
He is R.J. Anderson, CBS Sports Major League Baseball writer. You can follow him on Twitter at R_J_Anderson. R.J., always a pleasure. Stay well and, enjoy some baseball if it happens. Thanks so much.
Absolutely. Stay safe, everybody.
Take care.
I hadn't even thought about that part of it. I wonder how they will, in those places that do allow fans, how big of an area how big of a bubble they'll give the players who are sitting in the stands to where the closest fans are allowed to sit.
Look, I wonder if it'll be more toward the end of the dugout where they can come down very easily. There's usually a gate right there, as opposed to being right behind the plate.
Well, no, I assume that, but again, those are the seats. All those lower seats. The owners, if you're going to have fans, you'd love to sell them the the closest seats possible. But how big of an area, and how many players is it going to be? Because with these expanded rosters, especially for the first couple of weeks, how much area do you have to have for those players?
Well,
and how many are you going to put out there?
Right, but with the limited amount of fans, I would bet that they can space them out enough where that whole area where the players are, even though, yes, they can't sell those seats and they're high-dollared seats, I would imagine that would be the case, that the players here would have like you called it, a little bit of a bubble, but just basically separated from where the fans would be behind home plate, maybe the players. The Cubs dugouts on the first baseline or the third baseline?
Third.
So so they would have more of the fans towards the first baseline, or way down the left field line, and then in the bleachers, and they'd mix it up. I have no idea. It's anybody's guess. I still can't believe that we will have games with fans in the stands. I'll believe it when I say it. One other thing from baseball. The baseball organization that presents the annual MVP awards will consider whether the name of former Commissioner Kennesaw Mountain Landis should be pulled from future plaques. The issue is being addressed, according to Jack O'Connell. He is the longtime secretary-treasurer of the Baseball Writers Association of America. Former NL Most Valuable Players Barry Larkin, Mike Schmidt, and Terry Pendleton this week told the AP that they would favor removing Landis' name because of concerns about his handling of black players. I could not agree more, writer and broadcaster Peter Gammons tweeted. We'll take a timeout. This is Middays on Real Sports.
World of Professional Wrestling, as we like to do each and every Thursday around this time, with our good friend, the one and only. Not one, not two, not three, not four. All five. 5-star. Dustin Starr. What's up? How are you, Starr?
Yeah, good to be back on here, man. Let's talk some pro wrestling. I heard CJ earlier cutting a good promo about wearing masks. That's like a wrestling promo, CJ.
Oh, my fault. Listen, when the spirit moves me, it moves me, man. It doesn't make sense.
That's good.
I feel you.
That's what you want. You wrestling. Everyone should cut wrestling promos more often. That's my thing. Wrestling promos are extremely fun to cut. And when you see them in real life, it's wonderful.
Yeah, you can start it out all sorts of ways. Let me tell you something, brother. Me, woo, Gene, woo.
I'm just saying, man, if you want to go see Vanilla Ice, whatever, just know you're not getting Texas, Oklahoma this year. If Vanilla Ice worth Texas, Oklahoma, knock yourself out, man.
They took WrestleMania away from us this year. If you want to go see a live wrestling event, then you need to do your part, and it's simple. I know the death rates are going down, yeah, but still, if you catch it, which everybody is, numbers are huge. You get to quarantine for 2 weeks, and it shuts everything down. So you can't kind of have your cake and eat it too when it comes to this type of deal. And I think and I know this is kind of something you were talking about a little bit earlier, but this is something that has become a lot more serious over the last couple of months. I think we can all agree on that. Mm-hmm. And we can't have live events. We can't have mass gatherings and all that stuff. We don't do our part. And it's very, very simple to just throw a mask on when you go into a store or go into public. I mean,
what is the tricky thing that I'm shocked, but it's true. They did a vote yesterday in Knox County, Knoxville, Tennessee. And the Knox County mayor happens to be one Glenn Jacobs, a.k.a. Kane, a.k.a. Isaac Yankem, DDS. He's so many things was, but most notably Kane. Mm-hmm. This is a man who wore a mask as his job for, I would say, 15 years or so. He was the only vote against mandatory mask mandates in Knox County. At the Knox County. You wore a mask for 20. Come on, Kane.
Unreal.
Of all people.
Yeah.
You know about wearing a mask. It kept your face. You got burned in the funeral home. We know the story. That's why you had to wear the mask. Jeez.
Man, I hear people say I'm not going to be suffocated by a mask. Man, Kane wrestled 30-minute matches wearing a mask, and it did not suffocate him. And, by the way, he's like 6'9", 350 pounds.
Yeah.
I mean, if he can breathe in a mask, you can breathe in a mask while you go into the store. I'm sorry.
I think it's a little easier to go to Whole Foods and pick up your produce than it is to wrestle in an Inferno match against the Undertaker.
Right.
I mean, I think you're going to be okay. I promise.
Can we say the same thing?
Imagine.
Can we say the same thing about Mankind?
Yep.
But Mick Foley supports the mask situation, whereas Kane has turned his back, the ultimate heel turn against the entire group in Knox County.
Hey, if I say masked wrestler all time, just coolest masked wrestler, greatest masked wrestler all time, who y'all got?
Oh, that's easy. Rey Mysterio.
Ah, yes.
Hands down, man. He's a Hall of Famer. He has become world champion when people think he's